just gonna flip the key. Hopefully this thing starts. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Rustamod. We're back on the 1961 Rambler station wagon, and we have been doing a lot of work to this thing, trying to get it ready for Hot Rod Power Tour 2024. Now, in the last episode, you saw us fab up the rest of the exhaust, because now we have a lot more clearance underneath the car, and we have a lot more room to work. So we made a new exhaust, and we made our new dashboard that you guys saw in the last episode. We ended up using speed hut gauges and then CNC machining a bezel to be able to match our 61 Rambler dashboard. Now, I'll link that episode up here if you guys missed it, but we have a lot more work to do on the interior of the Rambler to get it ready for Power Tour. So I'll show you guys what we knocked out. So the first thing that we had to knock out was our valve covers. So our valve covers you saw in a previous episode that we ended up machining a cool Rambler / Rustamod logo into the top of the valve cover. Now, eventually we're gonna actually backfill that logo so you'll be able to see it a lot better, but we ended up painting them the same color as the engine, and after we get back from Power Tour, we'll finish them up, backfill them, and they'll look really cool. But for now, we're just gonna leave them green because we're kind of running out of time. So I went ahead and threw those things on, and they looked really cool. I was really happy with the way they turned out. I wasn't really sure if they were going to fit with the coil packs that we have for this thing, but they fit perfect and it turned out really cool. The next thing we had to tackle was some welding stuff. There's a bunch of holes in the back of the Rambler that we never really patched up from the original car. And the original car was actually pretty rusty, so we went ahead and patched all those holes up, and then we started working on the wiring. Now, the wiring was one of the biggest issues that we had with the car originally. We just threw a harness in there and literally had toggle switches on the thing to be able to get it to run. So this time we went through the whole thing, and we have our Holley Terminator X that runs the motor. Now, we have a manual transmission, so that's not too difficult. We have a few sensors on that. But we ended up running a universal harness for this car, and we ran the harness on each side of the frame rail. We're trying to keep the harness really low so you don't really see a lot of the wires and stuff going to the engine and to the headlights and stuff. We wanted to make it as low profile as possible. Now, with the Holley harness, we actually ended up drilling a hole in the transmission tunnel and then running all the wires for the Holley up through the transmission tunnel and tucking them underneath our intake manifold so you don't see a bunch of wires all over the place, and it cleans it up a ton, and it actually turned out really nice. So I'm really happy with the wire management that we did on the inside of the Rambler. It came out really good. We have a key, we have a bunch of features in the Rambler that we didn't have before, and it was well worth the time spent on wiring this thing correctly. All right, so our front end is pretty much ready to go. So we have the radiator in, we have the valve covers on, and we got the intake bolted down, but we want to put the front end on next so that way we can figure out where all that's going to go. We didn't get a chance to fill the valve covers. We still might have time, but we just threw them on for now because we want to see how the coil packs fit and all the harness is going to go. So all the harness is done on the engine side, so we still have to wire our headlights and the starter and the alternator. And then on the inside, we still have to finish the dash wiring and stuff, but we got to put the front clip back on next so that way we can figure out where we're going to mount the battery and the starter wiring and all the cables that go from the battery. We got the front clip on for the final time, and for the first time we could see what the motor is going to look like inside the engine bay with the firewall painted and the engine painted, so looks really good. It's definitely not going to be permanent yet because we're going to have to make some kind of shroud we want to do around this, and that's going to be pretty cool, but we're going to have to wait until after Power Tour. So the front end's mounted, it's solid, and we're still working on all the wiring and stuff on the inside, so this little stuff takes the most time. So we're trying to knock all this stuff out. So we have all the wiring done. You saw we got our valve covers on. We have all the stuff hooked up. Our Holley Terminator harness is all in there. We tried to tuck it as much as we can so that way you don't really see a lot of the wiring. You still see some around the injectors and stuff, but We ran the wiring harness down below on the frame on each side, so that way you don't see big wires sticking through the firewall, and it cleans it up a lot. Before we had the wiring coming through where our air conditioning hole was, so we're not going to have air conditioning for this trip, but when we come back we're going to try to knock out all the rest of the stuff that we didn't have time for, like air conditioning. We're going to try to do some cool stuff in the engine bay, our center console, and other stuff like that. But we have it pretty much ready to go, kind of where we left off whenever we pulled this whole thing apart. So if you guys remember, we had our battery down here. We ended up finding this piece of scrap, bending it for our battery tray, so that is sitting up here. Everything else is pretty much the same, it's just cleaned up a ton. So it looks really good. I'm really happy with the way this thing turned out. I really like the green. I wasn't really sure if I was gonna like it, but I think it looks pretty cool. One other thing we did was we upgraded the headlights. So our headlights were really terrible on this car, and I'm not really a big fan of modern headlights in old cars, so I found these on Amazon and they look pretty good. They're more modern headlights, but I think they'll light up a lot better. We'll have both our high beams and low beams working really good. So when you open the door to the Rambler, we have our interior lights pop on, which is really cool. We use the OEM door light switch on the sides, so all the doors open, the interior lights will come on, which is pretty cool. So we have our dash, as you guys saw. We made this in the last video. It looks really awesome. I'm really happy with the way that the whole dash bezel turned out. So for the lights, we couldn't make the Rambler switch work with the headlights that we have, so we ended up using a C10 switch. So this one actually is faulty, and whenever you turn the headlights on, they stay on for a second and then they'll flicker out. So I think the switch might be faulty. We checked the wiring and it looked pretty good, so hopefully we can get a new switch in time and we can have headlights. These two switches are for our air conditioning, and we're not running air conditioning right now. We will have to hook these up later whenever we come back. So the car that we got the engine from for the Rambler was a Camaro. We actually used the Camaro wiper motor in there, so that way we can make it work with the Rambler stuff. So we used the Camaro wiper switch, and we have the switch kind of in the back of the dash. So we basically cut the stalk off of it and then attached our Rambler switch to it, and so it still has all the delayed wipers and stuff, so all that stuff still works, and it's kind of hidden right in the back of the Rambler, so that works pretty cool. So we have wipers, and then the rest of the stuff, we have our radio. I'll turn the key on. You can see our fuel pump turns on, our gauges turn on, and we have our retro sound radio. So this radio is pretty cool because you can actually adjust the knob placement, so we still have all the factory Rambler knobs and stuff, but it works well with the screen size that was in their car originally. So we're trying to make a little bezel. It doesn't really fit perfect, but when we come back we'll kind of clean that up a little bit. But it looks pretty cool. We have radio, we have Bluetooth, and everything else. We have our speakers hidden under the roll bar here on both sides, and then we have two in the back. So that worked out pretty cool. These are actually for a motorcycle. We're trying to find something that mounts to the roll cage because we didn't really want to drill holes on the door panels or anything. So hopefully that works pretty good. And then I found this phone holder on Amazon, and I'm using that for our Holly dash here. So that'll work pretty good. Our fuel pressure sensor I'm waiting on a fitting for that, and then our oil pressure sensor ended up going bad, so I got a new one that's coming. So I still have a lot of interior stuff to do. As you can still see the sound deadening behind me. I still want to put some carpet over this for the time being. It's going to be temporary just for this trip, and then when we come back, like I said, we're going to do a console and stuff, but I need to get the seats bolted in this thing and finish up all the interior. But first, I gotta get this thing running because I need to know if it runs good before we do anything else. So let's try to fire this thing up for the first time since we pulled it apart. All right, I'm just gonna flip the key. Hopefully this thing starts. Ah. Our tack is working. Let me turn the lights on. Our tack's working. We have our speedo, our temperature, our fuel gauge is almost on full. That's kind of weird. That might not be right. Our oil pressure is working, so it's running. I don't have any coolant, so I don't want to run it super long. Looks like we got a tail light out. But it seems to run really good. Awesome. I expected it to run pretty good because we didn't really change anything on the engine besides the intake. Awesome. this thing runs pretty good. All right, now that it fired up and it looks like it should be drivable, I'm gonna try to clean up the interior, clean up all the little stuff, because we don't have a lot of time to get this thing on the road. So let me try to knock this stuff out, and then we can try to go for a test drive. All right, the interior is still looking a little rough. We have all the sound editing and stuff, but I really want to cover that stuff up because I hate the way that it looks. So I don't have a whole lot of time and I don't have a whole lot of options. So my options are the Mexican blanket and whatever this gray carpet is that I found on Amazon for 20 bucks. So this looks pretty terrible, I think. So I think I might want to put that in the rear. I'm gonna just cut a board out and cover the whole back up so we can put stuff on it. The Mexican blanket, I think maybe I'll put that over the transmission tunnel. This one's longer, so I can probably get it up under the dash so you don't really see the sound editing stuff. But the carpet that's in here is from the Lincoln Aviator we originally pulled the floor out of, and we cut it up to fit it, and it doesn't really look that great, but it's gonna be covered up with seats. So eventually we're gonna do a whole interior for this thing, get a new carpet and a console and all this other stuff. But for now, we gotta get it looking as good as we can when the time crunch. So I think I'm gonna try to cut the carpet up a little bit so that way I can tuck the whatever carpet I'm gonna put over the tunnel inside of that. And then I'm gonna try to cover up the back as much as I can. Then I'll make something for the back and throw this over top of it. Alright, so I got the seats in, I got the carpet in, not really the best at all. I don't really like the way that looks, but the seats are somewhat mounted. The front two are. The back two are a really big pain to put in, but I got them mounted good enough. Hopefully we don't have a whole lot of people driving in the back seat of this thing, but just the leg room is not very good, not really where I wanted it, but it'll do for now. So I think that's it. I think we got most stuff tied down. I ended up making a little battery hold down here. I put coolant in it, put oil in it. But I think it's time we try to drive this thing. So let's hit it on the road and see how it does. All right, so I got my Holly mounted here. All of our gauges are on. We still got to program the speedometer with the GPS, but we'll do that a little later. We got our radio. We have our dome lights when you open the door. So we're gonna try to drive it and see how it does. All right, it seems to be running pretty good, driving pretty good. It seems to be staying on temp. Oil pressure looks pretty good. So I'm heading to Patrick's right now so I can get an alignment, and then we should be able to hit the road with this thing. We got a little bit more button up to do, but hopefully we're dialed for power tour. So we'll see how this alignment goes and we'll try to drive it some more. Alright guys, I just made the about hour drive home to my house from the shop, and the thing drove awesome. There's some little tweaks that we have to do, but not preventing us from driving this thing on Power Tour. So I'm super excited that we got this thing done just in time for Hot Rod Power Tour. We literally leave tomorrow to go to Cincinnati to drop off our truck and trailer and then head down to Bowling Green for Hot Rod Power Tour 2024. And we're super excited to go, especially with the Rambler. This is literally 5 years in the making of having this car, building it for this event, and finally being able to go. So make sure you guys follow along on the next few weeks. We're gonna be posting all of our journey about Power Tour. I'll post a video probably in the middle of the week on Wednesday, and then another video on Friday. And that way you guys can see both halves of what we're doing at Hot Rod Power Tour. But we're super excited to go, and I'm super excited that we got the Rambler done. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the episodes we have coming up here. And we'll see you guys in the next one.